Hello everybody, and welcome to today's presentation, Optimize Customer Experience with a Faster, More Reliable Website. Before we get started, I'd like to take care of a couple of housekeeping items. First, if you have any questions for our presenters today, please post those into the questions panel so that we can get to them after the presentation. We're recording today's presentation and we'll be making it available shortly after the event concludes. Now that we're through the housekeeping items, I'd like to introduce you to our presenters. Anthony Edwards has been the CTO at Eggplant for over 5 years. He has led initiatives such as digital automation intelligence, digital performance management, and now customer experience optimization. We also have Alex Painter. Alex joins us from Eggplant's acquisition of NCC Group's Web Performance Division and is now a technical consultant on digital performance management team. Well, without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Anthony to begin the presentation. Anthony?
Hey, fantastic. Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining today for this presentation about optimizing your website experience. As you can see here, I'm talking about digital performance management. So Eggplant as a company, fundamentally what we're all about always is helping people create those amazing products that delight their users and continuously drive and improve the business outcome, i.e. what the point of this software is. Why did you create this software in the first place? We're trying to help people make products that drive those fundamental purposes. Either people may be doing more banking online if you're a digital banking outfit, doctors filling in more forms more quickly if you're an electronic medical record company, or at the other extreme of our business, helping the Orion spacecraft get to Mars. Now, we've always focused traditionally on the testing area. We've branched out now into monitoring as well. And the rationale there is we believe that these are the places in the development cycle where people look at their products and say, are these achieving their purpose? So we're all going towards DevOps these days. Testing is the part of the dev cycle. Monitoring is the part of the ops cycle, where you really look at your products and say, are they achieving their purpose? Are they doing what I want to do? But we definitely think that testing and also monitoring, that's the focus here, need to expand. Monitoring needs to expand beyond just availability, is my side up. It needs to even move beyond performance, how fast is it responding? It needs to start really focusing on what are the business outcomes that are happening on my website? How many people are converting? How many people are coming to read my news site? How many patient records are being updated? How quickly? Understanding those business outcomes, understanding how the technical aspects of the website impact those business outcomes. We need to start recommending how to address them and predicting the impact of change rather than just sort of throwing a whole lot of sort of data back at the user. And we need to loop back to the development cycle. One of the big frustrations I hear a lot from people in operations teams, in marketing teams who are using sort of monitoring products is we get all these great insights actually, but they never end up back in the product. We don't see that change happening. We've got this insight. We're not actioning it. So fundamentally, what's the point? And that's what Eggplant and that's what digital performance management is all about. It's a new approach to monitoring and testing, which is all about addressing these key principles I've just mentioned. So presentation today, what I want to do is talk about what is digital performance management, how does it work, and how can you guys start taking advantage of it. Right, so let's step back a bit and start with a problem. We all know performance matters. We all know performance is important. Actually, Forrester, the big analyst firm, published a great paper about a year ago now into user experience. And they did a very wide, I think 20,000 people were involved in this study. And they looked at what is user experience. We use this term a lot. What are the factors that really influence how people report their experience of a website and of a mobile app? And their conclusion was this: it was performance is user experience. They decided that, until you've got your performance totally sorted out, everything else is in the noise. You shouldn't worry about layout. You shouldn't worry about colors. You shouldn't worry about fonts. You actually don't even need to worry that much about the odd exception being thrown here and there, which as a technologist always makes you feel a bit weird. It's sort of like that. But exceptions and crashes and these things, they're the worst thing that can happen. But actually, Forrester said, no, not from your user's perspective. The worst thing that can happen is a poor response time, a poor performance. So we all know performance matters. None of you are surprised by what I just said. And there's loads of information in the public domain that highlight just how important it is. The graph on the top left is adoption rates. It says that something like 95%, in fact more than that, it says 96 or 97% of apps are deleted within the first 30 days of use, right? And the number one reason given on the App Store and on Google Play is poor performance. So that's pretty important. 53% of mobile users abandon sites that take longer than 3 seconds to load. So there's all this data in the world that says performance is really important. It also correlates, for what it's worth, with information on specific customers. So, for example, Amazon, they're actually great at publishing a lot of information. They published some data about 2 years ago now that showed that a 1% increase in the response time of their website, 1%, 100 millisecond increase in the response time of their website correlates with a 1% reduction in revenue. Now, that's amazing. Every time I say that to a developer, they actually get quite upset. They sort of say, well, 100 milliseconds, that's ridiculous. That's, the network's going to affect it more than that. The garbage collector is going to affect it more than that. But it doesn't matter, right? Users don't care. That's the fact of it. 100 millisecond increase has a tangible impact on your revenue. The BBC, big news site obviously in the UK, reports that they lose 10% of visitors every time they have a 1 second increase in load time. Staples seeing similar things. Google seeing similar things to Amazon when it comes to their ad revenue. So if Google search starts increasing its response times by about 250 milliseconds, they see a decline in ad revenues because it just takes that bit longer for the ads to appear. You're a little more impatient. You're less likely to click on an ad. $90 million right there. On the positive side, because obviously all of that was very negative, response time increases and bad things happen. eTerm, a customer of ours, they're a clothing retailer in the UK, they reduced their page load times by 0.7 seconds, and that increased conversion rates by 20%. Right. So lots of data, lots of facts. Key point is performance matters. We all know it. But no one does it, right? This is the craziness. This is the thing that doesn't quite add up in the world at the moment. Everyone knows performance matters. No one was sitting there in that last slide saying, well, I disagree with this, or most of you were sitting there saying, we know all this. We know all this. But however, despite the fact that 100% of people that I've ever met would benefit from performance management, only 55% of teams today do any performance testing. Right? You go into every e-commerce shop, you go into any mobile app, development house, only half of them roughly are doing any performance testing at all. If you then make that, hang on, how many of you do a little bit of performance testing on at least every app you do? So you do some performance testing, you do some performance testing on every app. That goes down to 20%, 1 in 5. And then how many teams actually have what I would call continuous performance management, i.e. performance testing is part of their process, the same way functional testing is, or code reviews may be, or release management, and it's 5%, 1 in 20. All right, so something doesn't add up here, because everyone knows performance matters, and it matters a lot. Right, we just saw all those stats. It matters a lot, but only 1 in 20 teams are doing continuous performance management. And people aren't stupid, and people aren't lazy. There's got to be a reason for this, right? It can't just be as simple as everyone in the world's stupid. So why? Why? And the answer is because although performance matters, the situation is a little more complex than that, right? Because the truth is, while performance of your website or your app matters, not all performance matters. It certainly doesn't matter equally. So, for example, lastminute.com, right? It's a big travel website for those of you who don't know. Travel is probably the most competitive retail sort of sub-market on the internet. Consumers are very unloyal to websites. They absolutely see them as a commodity. And I think I saw a stat once that said the average person checks 4 to 5 travel sites before they book their tickets. So really high transaction rates, really high jumping around. For those people, and we did a lot of work with Skyscanner, the checkout experience matters a lot. The performance of that checkout matters hugely. And that makes intuitive sense, right? It's quite quick to go through the buying cycle for plane tickets, for example. While you're buying those plane tickets, you have this feeling that, prices are going up. You have this great sense of urgency. So the speed of that checkout experience is really important. On the flip side, if you look at an online grocer, so maybe Whole Foods or maybe Ocado in the UK, the checkout experience actually isn't so important. And you think that's a bit weird, but it's because by the time you get to the checkout on a grocery store where you're buying your sort of week or your fortnightly shopping for food, you've already spent 20 minutes, 25 minutes on the website. So if a page takes an extra half second or an extra second to load, you're not going to abandon your basket, right? So the point here is that while performance matters, not every page on your website matters equally. Obviously, your GDPR compliance page doesn't matter at all. So how do you identify what matters, right? The second thing is, how much does it matter? Because there's lots of things that impact conversion rate, and there's lots of things that impact your revenue. So let's say you've got, you do some customer research and you decide that the hero banner on the front page of your website is really important, and having a nice, big, high-resolution hero banner matters a lot. So, but that's, of course, going to slow down your load speed. So what's the trade-off, right? Does the hero banner increase conversions by 20% and the reduced performance decrease by 3%, in which case we should definitely have it? Or is it the other way around? So it's not just enough to know which parts of your website matter in terms of performance. You really need to know how much each of those parts matter. You got to quantify the impact of that technical performance on the business outcome, right? So it's a bit harder than I was initially suggesting to work out what parts of your website matter in terms of business outcome and how much. But then once you've determined that, you've got a second problem, which is, okay, great, you've told me, you've explained the problem to me really well. I'm convinced there's a problem. I know how much it is. So how do I improve that? Right? And I think this is the other barrier people have. They sort of think, look, I can go down this performance path, but I'm just going to end up with something telling me that if I could speed up the internet, I'd get more conversions, and that's great, but that's not going to happen. Or maybe, if Oracle's database worked faster, I'd be better. So how do I know I'm going to, or maybe just there is something I could do, but I don't have the technical skills to work it out. So how to improve performance? What are the bottlenecks? I think that's the next barrier. And then finally, the last barrier we hear about is achieving continuous performance management. So this is this thing I hear from people, which is, look, I could invest a whole lot of time understanding what parts of my website matter the most, how to improve it, even improving it, but I'm just not convinced that 2 months later, I'm still going to be getting the benefit of that. I'm going to improve performance as a one-off thing, but then in 2 weeks' time, some developer's going to do something silly in a stored procedure on the database. I'm going to lose all that benefit, and I've just wasted a whole lot of money. So the situation is a bit more complex than just performance matters, right? A lot of teams don't know, where do I start? What are the areas of my website that matter? How much do they matter? How do I improve that? And how do I do that on an ongoing basis? And I think it's that's putting all these other teams off. These 4 out of 5 teams that aren't performance testing every app, or these 19 out of 20 teams that aren't doing continuous performance management. I think it's all those barriers add up to just, look, I'm not convinced that if I invest the time and money, I'm going to get the return. And obviously that's what digital performance management is all about, right? It's all about making that process easy for people, very clear for people, as automated as possible. It's about giving people confidence that we're going to take them through a structured process where at the end, they're going to be getting benefit time and time again, and structured benefit and quantified benefit. So it starts off, so if I just talk through this process, so it starts off with monitoring the website. And the key thing we're doing here at this stage in digital performance management is we're understanding the relationship between the business outcome. So in a retailer, someone buying something from your website, in a bank, someone doing transactions online, in an electronic medical record customer, doctors and nurses filling out forms. It's understanding the relationship between those business outcomes, the user behaviors, and the technical aspects of the website, the performance, the error rates, the usability, and so on. And this is really the key point here, because what we can actually do something about is the technical behavior. You can talk to a developer and say, hey, we need to reduce the load speed of this page by 0.7 seconds. We can say to people, hey, we need to make this UI more intuitive. We shouldn't have the cancel button to the left of the submit button. That's crazy. That's non-conventional. And we can say, hey, we need to find what is causing these exceptions and get rid of them. So we can do something about technical behavior, but what we care about is the business outcome. And this is a big problem most software development companies have. They know what the business outcome is that they're trying to achieve. They're trying to attract more users. They're trying to get more conversions. They're going to try and do all sorts of things. But they can't directly you can't go to a developer and say, hey, improve conversions by 7%. So somehow you've got to do that mapping between the business outcome and the technical behavior of your product. And that's the kind of magic that, your product manager or your, all these customer servers are supposed to get at. But it's a very unstructured, very complex area. And the whole point of digital performance management is to start to use data science, analytics, and machine learning to really understand what is the relationship between the technical behavior of my product and the business outcome. So we identify that. The next step is to quantify those key drivers. So once we understand what are the technical aspects that are driving the business outcomes, which are the ones that correlate, understand how much does each contribute, if there are variable factors there, how do they play off against one another. The third is then to identify the improvements. So as I said before, there's no point for telling someone you have a problem without telling them, hey, and here's the solution. So it's using, mechanisms to understand what are the bottlenecks, how can I improve performance, and then it's updating and measuring. So you've got to update your product and you've got to measure the impact. And this is where a lot of the machine learning comes into play and then helps the earlier parts of the cycle get more and more and more accurate. So you monitor the website, you quantify it, you identify the improvements, and you make it, and then you measure that the prediction you made in step 2 actually happened. If it did happen, great. There's, you've got confirmation for that. You can talk to your other stakeholders and say, hey, this was really beneficial. We could keep doing it. If it didn't quite, if it wasn't quite the same, maybe you got 80% of the benefit, you can feed that back into the engine and it can ever increase and improve the accuracy of its predictions and its recommendations. Now that's very cyclical. That's all about the idea of I have a website or an app in production and I want to continually optimize it. But of course, there's another side to it as well, which is I'm constantly adding new functionality to the website as well, or to the app as well. Now, I don't want to wait, right? I don't want to release that new functionality into production and then sort of have to wait for a couple of weeks while we work out that correlation and then fit it back. What I really want is to be able to predict before I release that code, what impact is this going to have on the business outcomes. And the whole point is we can take the model, the data science model that we create in step 1 and apply that to new code that hasn't been released yet. So we know what the technical behaviors of the product are in live now. We know how they impact conversions. Through our testing, and I'll talk a bit more about this later, we know how we think this new code is going to impact those technical aspects, and therefore we can predict what the impact is it's going to have on the business outcome. And you can see how you could even start taking this back into the design phase, right? At the design phase, or the backlog prioritization stage, you could be saying, look, guys, if we want to improve conversions by 10%, what we need to focus on is reducing errors or improving the UI or adding more functionality or improving the performance of these areas and so on. So that's all good. It's a good point to raise an example. So Cook is a food retailer in the UK. Like a lot of retailers, traditionally bricks and mortars, so they sell through about 550 different stores. But of course, like all retailers, they're seeing digital online as being a bigger and bigger and bigger part of their business. So it's the fastest growing area of their business, and they want to make sure that's very successful, because whilst it's a great opportunity for them, like all retailers, it's a big threat, because if one of your competitors goes online better than you do, that could be the end of you. So Cooker Online, they're digital, and they engage with us to see how we could help them improve their the conversion rate, the business performance of their website using this process I outlined before. So, and we did exactly what I just said. We used our real user monitoring, user analytics to understand how, what are the user journeys people are doing? What are the user behaviors? Do people buy on their first visit, on their second visit? Really understanding everything we can about how users behave when they're buying. We also, at the same time, are gathering huge amounts of information about the website at the technical level, and we tend to do that via more synthetic monitoring. So understanding, what's the response time of the website, what are the error rates, what are the rendering times, what's the layout of the page, how does that change over time, how's that impacted, and then also even lower level, like what's the CPU usage, what's the memory usage, what's the network traffic like, all that kind of thing. So we're gathering that information about users, about the technical behavior of the website, and we're building that model I talked about before. So this is step one. We're building that model of how does the technical behavior of the website impact the business performance. We then use what we call the performance impact prediction report to identify which parts of the website are having the biggest impact on revenue and quantifying that impact. So we did that. We identified those areas. We made a prediction on, if you improve the performance of this page and by 0.6 seconds, this page by 0.3 seconds, and this page by 0.4 seconds, we think that'll have a 7% increase on your conversion rate and ultimately on your revenue. So that was good. We then used more performance monitoring, the performance analyzer, some load testing to automatically identify how do we improve that performance? What are the bottlenecks? What are the areas that are taking a long time? What look like the areas that we could improve the performance of? We deployed those improvements, and of course, it's a good news story. We got a 7% increase in the conversion rate, so the digital revenues increased by 7% as a result of this process, and this is a public case study. And it was 94% in line with the prediction we made at step 2 of the process. So if you remember that previous slide, step 1 was monitoring the website, building the model. Step 2 was quantifying the key drivers of business performance and obviously quantifying what will be the business impact improvement if you change these technical factors. And we got that prediction right to within 94%, which was pretty cool. And they're very excited. And of course, we've got more projects ongoing with those guys now. So that's kind of digital performance management as a process, as a concept. What do we do about that? How can we help you? Well, really, it's about providing products that automate that process and provide you with the information you need to go and the analysis you need to go through that process. So the first two, there's basically a set, the Eggplant DPM suite is a set of kind of 5 elements. The first two, real user monitoring and synthetic performance monitoring, are all about monitoring the website, building that model, as I said before, about the technical behaviors and how they impact the business outcomes, and quantifying sort of the impact that will have, quantifying those key drivers. So we use real user monitoring and performance monitoring. These are really sort of rich, deep products. There's a lot of functionality there. I'm not going to go into it all. I think Alex is going to show some of this stuff in his demonstration, but just, quickly, if I highlight some things, dynamic expected ranges. This is all about understanding the context, right? Because, the easiest example is to say, if you don't have intelligent analytics, every analytics engine is going to tell you that, there's this big anomaly, which is that every year on Black Friday, your website surges. Now, of course, that's not an anomaly. That's going to happen every year because there's a specific event on that day. Or you may be running a marketing campaign, and of course, that's going to drive more traffic to your website. So dynamic expected ranges is all about understanding the contextual information around all the other things going on around the technical aspects of your website that may impact performance. Everything we do from the user perspective, because that's what matters to users. I think one of the things going on a lot in the performance testing world is people are realizing that measuring when sort of HTTP response packets arrive at my device just isn't that interesting. What matters is when the user sees something change on the screen, when they can start interacting with it. Time to render, time to first interaction. These are the metrics that matter, and it's really coming at it from that user perspective that we do. The other thing is, I think a lot of analysis tools in the world around monitoring, around testing, around infrastructure, you run all these great tests and analyses, and what the products give you is a huge amount of data and some basic tools or even some advanced tools to slice and dice that data, look at it on various time sequences, do various cohort analyses and so on. But what most people discover pretty quickly is that's really hard, and it's sort of looking for a needle in a haystack. The problem's not finding the answer, the problem's finding the right question. And so what we put a lot of effort into is these things like significant elements and impact prediction, which are all about, rather than just providing you with huge amounts of data and some tools to visualize that data, let's just give you the answer. Well, let's just tell you what the question is and tell you the answer. So significant elements will tell you what are the aspects of your website that correlate with business outcomes, what are the user segments you need to worry about, do you need to worry about sort of 18 to 25-year-olds using Samsung Galaxy S7s, or maybe those people just never buy from your website, or maybe you do care about that. So a lot of what we focus on is trying to give people answers rather than just giving people a whole lot of data. And then finally, as I said over on the left, it's all about that post-change analysis. So once you've made the change, seeing what did happen, both so that you know what happened and you've got sort of confirmation, but also so that can feed back into the machine learning engine and you can continually refine, getting more and more accurate results. So the first step, well, the first two products, real user monitoring and performance monitoring, are all about building that model and quantifying those key drivers. The next bit, as I said, is all about, right, I know I've got a problem. I know where that problem is. How do I fix it? And that's where performance analyzer and load testing come in. All about, again, automatically analyzing your website, analyzing your mobile app, and identifying where are the bottlenecks and how do we recommend you solve that. And then finally, the fifth element is fast start services. So, and this can really vary according to people's needs. So some people come to us and they say, look, we've got a long history in performance testing and analytics. We know exactly what we're doing. We love the products. We think we can do the process ourselves. Thank you very much. And we just do some basic training for these people, some enablement, and then support them through the process. That's fine. Other people say to us, look, what we'd really like is for you guys to handhold us through the first iteration of this process. So, Eggplant, I want you guys to come in and really run the first cycle with us sort of shadowing you. Then maybe we swap so that we're running it with you shadowing us. And then you can just do sort of arm's length support. And that's cool. Other people want us to sort of run that as a managed service, so continually run that. And we provide all those different options. So the point here really is just that in addition to the products, we offer various services to help people go through that process and get started. So in summary here, before I hand over to Alex for the demonstration, then it's going to come back to me, by the way, and I'm going to talk about some futures and what's coming up next and some of the sort of exciting and cool stuff. So the Eggplant DPM suite, it's 5 things. It's real user monitoring, it's synthetic performance monitoring, it's performance analyzer, it's load testing, and then it's that fast start advisory. And the whole point of it is to automate and support that DPM process and really help you understand what matters, what are the technical aspects of my website that matter in terms of the business outcomes, how much do they matter, how do I improve that, and how do I do that continuously. So hopefully you're all sitting there thinking, wow, this sounds amazingly cool, but I'd love to see it in action. So that's what we're going to do now. So I think we're hopefully going to hand over to Alex. He can give a demonstration.
Thank you very much, Anthony. So I'm going to start with real user monitoring, which, just in case you don't know, is a solution for us which collects business and performance metrics basically for every visit to your website. And I've landed here on what is for our solution, at least the landing page, which is the impact over time report. This basically gives you an overview of those key metrics really, and gives you an idea, even at this point, of the extent to which they correlate. So, for example, you might see a spike in page impressions causing a correlating spike in load time, for example. But I'm not going to dwell on this. I'm going to go right into something a bit more interesting, because, as Anthony was saying, we're not really, as people who make websites and help to make websites faster, we quite often get caught up in the idea that it's good to make websites faster for its own sake, in a way, that it improves customer experience, it's best practice. But what the business really cares about is certain KPIs, such as conversion, revenue, bounce rate, engagement, that sort of thing. And so this is what we've really tried to do with performance impact prediction. This is all about making the business case for performance. So we'll tell you, based on your past data, given a certain change in performance load time, how well you would have done during a given period in terms of revenue, conversions, bounces, and pages per session. So in this example, I've just basically cut a second off load time, and you can immediately see that as far as our data is concerned, that would have resulted in some kind of interesting changes in revenue and conversions. And as Anthony just mentioned, we've done this process with Cook a few times, with other customers as well, and discovered that this really results in a remarkably that there's a remarkably accurate, over 94% accuracy rate. So this is all about making the business case for performance. So understanding that performance isn't just good for its own sake, but it will result in actually something that delivers benefits to the business. Once you've done that, though, the next thing to do is to identify opportunities for improvement. And there are broadly two ways to go about it. One is to look for user segments that might be seeing poorer performance than others. So in the significant elements report, we see on the left-hand side those elements that relate to slower load times than you would ideally expect. And on the right-hand side, those factors that correlate with faster load times. So here, and this is not an uncommon picture, you can see that Android is closely correlated with slower performance. That might indicate, for example, that you've got an over-reliance on JavaScript to build your pages. JavaScript tends to be slower to execute on older Android devices in particular, or lower-end devices. And so that could be a good place to start. The other place to look, though, is to look at which pages are slower than other pages. And this is the worst performance report, which highlights the 150 slowest URLs on your website. And here you've got load time plotted on the x-axis and traffic plotted on the y-axis. So really what you're looking for is pages sort of towards the right-hand side and towards the top of this chart. Very often you'll find that the home page up here, that's, depending on your point of view, either something to be not concerned about or very concerned about. The reason it's there is that visitors come to your homepage very often with a clear cache. So it stands to reason that because they don't have assets for the site already cached, the homepage is going to be a little slower than other pages. Personally, I think that means it's a good opportunity to treat the homepage as a special case, but that's a matter of opinion. For the purposes of this demo, though, what I'm going to do is focus on another of these pages, on a vegetarian meals page, and I'm going to jump out of real user monitoring in a moment. But I'll just finish up here by talking about the idea that this is a really good report to look for clusters of pages. So if you could identify groups within this chart, it's a very good way to identify common factors, those things that might be contributing to slower load times. For example, perhaps it's all basket pages, all checkout pages, all product category pages, that sort of thing. And so that makes this particularly powerful. But for now, I'm going to jump out of real user monitoring and into Performance Analyzer. The reason for this is that real user monitoring gives you some really great, it's a gold mine of jumping off points, if you like. So some really good starting points. But if you really want to dive into performance and really understand what's going on, then you need something else. And I'm going to quickly look at Performance Analyzer and a test I've run on this page in Performance Analyzer. And this is basically a way to run real browser tests with different device profiles, different network conditions, site crawls, just to get an object level view of what's going on an individual page. So on this particular page, for example, looking at a waterfall chart of all the objects loaded on the page, you can immediately see, well, it's quite a long page. That might be contributing to slow load times. You can also see it's a very big page, which again is a good sign that might be behind the fact that it was highlighted as one of the slower pages in real user monitoring. Something else that's useful about going into a tool like Performance Analyzer is that it gives you an indication of visual performance. So you can look at a film strip or a video to understand how the raw load times actually correlate with what the end user actually experiences. On top of that, you can get a certain amount of automated insights from something like this. So I click on the advice link here, and you find out that there's an awful lot of static resources on this page that could do with some expires headers or max age headers to ensure that more users have more assets cached when they visit this page. And that, again, could be something to look at in terms of optimizing this particular page. This is a pretty truncated look at an individual page in Performance Analyzer. In reality, you'd perhaps go into a little bit more detail than this, but for a 10-minute demo, this is probably about as far as I'll go here. And I'm just going to jump back into real user monitoring now to look at the performance trends report. Because once you've made some changes to your website, the next step is to actually understand what the impact of those changes on real users is. And this is where something like performance trends comes in handy. So we're back in real user monitoring now, and you can see a number of anomalies being highlighted here. So in our solution, sort of slower load times than normal or than expected get highlighted in red, and faster load times get highlighted in green. So you can see after a particular release here, there are a number of anomalies as this page, as this site got a lot faster, until this became the new normal. So we've talked a little bit about real user monitoring. It's also worth verifying changes in performance with synthetic monitoring as well, because while real user monitoring can be affected by external factors, to get a sort of clear, consistent baseline to test against, synthetic monitoring is particularly useful for that. So verifying that the changes you've made, the changes in performance are due to changes that you've made to your system and to nothing else. Although, of course, the real value of synthetic monitoring is in alerting you in changes to performance and availability of key user journeys. So this is a bit of a brief whistle-stop tour of some of the products and some of the ways in which we'll go through the process of digital performance management. But basically, it's not really about the detail here, it's about the principle. It's understanding the impact on the business, identifying the opportunities for improvement, understanding how to make those improvements, and then validating the impact on the end user. And at this point, I'm going to hand back to Anthony.
Great. I will just wait for my screen to appear. Fantastic. So thank you very much, Alex. Hopefully, to everyone on the webinar, that helped helped you really visualize the kind of process, the sort of more abstract process I was talking about. So, as usual, I have talked for longer than I expected to, but that's okay. So I will go through the next bit pretty quickly to leave some time for questions, but it will still make perfect sense. So all that stuff's pretty cool. And hopefully you can also see how this is really just the beginning. That, when I talk about that, the kind of core principles of this process and what we're trying to do, I build a model about how the technical aspects of the website or product impact the business outcomes. How do we bring that back into the development process? And how do we really make software development as a whole really be that whole process from sort of ideation through requirements through all that, regardless of whether your process is highly iterative or not. How do we make that all about the outcome that you're trying to achieve? Because that's really what we're all about here. I mean, if you think about those of you who are involved directly in the development process, you'll know that, what really happens is very early on in the cycle, you talk about what is it we're trying to achieve. We've got this vision, we've got this outcome, we've got this impact we're trying to have. Then quickly you go from that to a product ideas, features, functions, behaviors, and you really forget about that business outcome until you actually ship the product into live. And for a lot of development teams, they forget that forever, right? And that's the frustration that appears between sort of more those marketing analytics or ops team and the development team. So there's a huge potential there to really revolutionize how software development is done. We're just at the beginning here. So what are we doing next? And this slide is just to say we're doing lots. There's lots and lots going on, some really cool stuff. I'm not going to go through it all because that would take a very long time and end up being a little bit dry. But I would like to put the offer out there to anyone that if anyone's interested in a session with us to talk through the roadmap in detail, to share some ideas, please get in touch. We'd love to talk. So what I wanted to do now, though, is really just pick up on 4 points in that roadmap and highlight those. So the first is the fact that, what's coming next? Well, we're going to go beyond performance. So as you've seen from Alex, the focus of what we do today is really all on performance. I mean, that's the key technical aspect that we sort of correlate with business outcome. And it's a good place, it's the right place to start, as Forrester said. But there's lots of other things that do impact how users behave and what are the business outcomes. Error rates, usability in terms of product attributes, but also if I go back, also just how you produce the software, right? The technology stack used actually has you can easily build models that show there's a huge impact by the technology stack you use in terms of the user and the business outcomes. There are some choices you can make which are going to be really bad in terms of the business outcomes. There are technology choices you're going to make which are really good in terms of which frameworks, which languages. Tableau is really popular at the moment for people creating sort of more employee-facing analytics dashboards. Is it really effective? You can actually build that model. So, and then also who's involved. I mean, something that I think intuitively makes sense to everyone is that a developer working on a component of the product that they've never worked on before is more likely to reduce the performance, the usability, or create errors than a developer who's been working on that component, for 5 years and maybe even created it from scratch. So, and actually, the simplest one is any code submitted after midnight has a huge chance, and before 6 a.m., has a huge chance of resulting in a defect. And then finally, marketing campaigns. I said before, we've done a little bit of that. There's a lot more we could do. So the first thing we're doing, which I'm really excited about because, as I keep saying, I think this is really transformational, but is identifying more and more and more of those elements that impact the product in ways that drive user behavior and business outcomes. So it's going beyond just technical performance to anything that impacts the business performance. The second thing is going further and further beyond giving information, which is valuable, but really giving recommendations, which is what people really want to have. So, we're gathering all this information about what are the conversions, what are the technical behaviors, what's going on, what are the bottlenecks, what could we do, We're gathering all that information. Previously, we've exposed that more in what I would call scenario planning or what-if analyses. So if I did this, what would happen? But actually, we can just, it's a computer, right? We can auto-generate millions of those scenarios very quickly and then just tell you, here's the top 10 things you could do. So here are the top 10 things you could do to your website or app to improve the business outcomes. Bang. So that's something that's actually coming quite soon. Post-optimization analysis, so as I said, measuring what actually happened after the change, both to give you reassurance and to kind of show people here's the impact we're having, but also that's really critical in terms of feeding back into the machine learning and getting more and more accurate, high-impact changes. And then finally, we're putting a lot of work into, I guess, anomaly detection and also sort of what's changed analyses. And this is all about, getting rid of all the noise, getting rid of all the data and all the graphs and just telling you, here's what you need to change. So anomaly detection is all about detecting something surprising, something unusual. And that's really hard because, to a computer that doesn't have any context, everything can look a bit weird. And, or what's the magnitude of that? Is that, how much does that matter? Is that to be expected at 2 a.m. every morning because we run all the backups and at that point, recommendations just get ignored. The more confidence we can have that what we've just detected is a true anomaly, the more weight we can give to those things, the better simulations we can do, the better correlation matrices we can do, the better the recommendations we can do. So one of the most important things to giving super accurate, low false positive recommendations is just to really, really, really know if something was an anomaly, was something unusual, was something a surprise. And then also what's changed. Because once you find that something unusual has happened, what you want to know is, well, what changed? Because if nothing changed and something unusual happened, well, that's interesting. I can start digging. But what I'm going to dig for is, well, something must have changed, right? So, because if you can't find the thing that's changed, you can't do anything about it. What you want to do is say, suddenly at these points, suddenly my revenue seems to go up by 5%. What's driving that? And if I can identify what's driving that, I can then replicate that all over the place. And I get, so rather than just getting an extra 5% at 2 p.m. on Thursdays, I can get that extra 5% all the time, which is obviously huge value. So first thing we're doing is expanding beyond performance to everything that impacts the business outcome. Second thing we're doing is getting a lot more into, rather than giving information, just giving recommendation. Here's what you need to change. Third one, really simple. I talk a lot about the web when I talk about this stuff because that's kind of the natural home of real user monitoring and synthetic monitoring. It's all comes from web monitoring, right? But we're in the process of getting this working in all sorts of different systems. Eggplant, on the testing side, has long been very strong in its ability to test really any platform, any technology. And as I said earlier, we're used on everything from sort of the Orion spacecraft to Internet of Things devices to connected cars to smart homes. And we want to get all this post-release analytics around how does technical performance impact business outcome. We want to get that onto all these different systems as well, onto mobile, point of sale, connected car, and smart homes, because these are the systems where you're really engaging directly more with people. Nothing's more of an engagement with people than smart homes, and nothing's more important in terms of optimizing that user experience. So we're working to get this sort of DPM process embedded in all these different systems. Finally, and I think the thing which brings it all together, I guess, and is the bit we're really excited about, and is why kind of web performance and Eggplant have come together, is exactly, it's about bringing digital performance management and testing, or as we call it, digital automation intelligence, together to achieve some pretty cool stuff. So on this slide here, I've got really a visualization of everything I've just been talking about. So user analytics and synthetic monitoring to build up a model, doing the analytics on that, understanding how to improve the conversion rate of my product, in addition to doing the more traditional availability monitoring, performance monitoring, and so on. I haven't talked about it, but just to give you a quick feel, The other part of what Eggplant as a company does is all around testing, so pre-release testing. We have a very model-driven approach, so rather than kind of dealing with scripts and microtransactions, really dealing at more of a sort of semantic level around what users are really doing on your product. And then we use intelligence to sort of auto-generate tests from there. So you can auto-generate loads of tests. They can run across any system. You look at all aspects, functionality, usability, performance. So you really understand how is this product behaving. And then we have sort of an execution platform. So you can run that across, every different combination of browser or mobile device or head unit or whatever it is. And then, of course, feeding in to results and release analytics to tell you, should you release your app now? If you release your app now, what's going to happen is customer satisfaction going to go up or is it going to go down? So one thing we're doing at the moment is putting all that together. And there's really three benefits of putting it all together. The first is simply that you make your testing much more user-centric. Rather than having a smoke test run every night that's just 100 test cases that you've kind of picked because you think they're important, why wouldn't your smoke test just be the 100 user journeys that are happening in live production right now that are the most common? So look at the last 30 days, what were the most common user journeys, and let's use them as our smoke test. When I look at performance, rather than saying, oh, this page must respond in 3 seconds, saying, well, in live, we're finding that the moment performance goes over 2.4 seconds, I'm seeing a significant drop-off in conversions. So I'm going to set my threshold. I'm going to set my threshold there. So the first thing is really all about how do I make my my testing, my pre-production testing, more user-centric. But the coolest thing I think is in this diagram. So if I really quickly look at development and testing, right? The benefit of development and testing is that it's pre-release, so things that have happened haven't impacted my users yet. And issues you find in testing tend to get fixed, right? If you find a bug, you fix it. There's a nice tight coupling of testing and development. The problem is you've got no view on users and business outcomes. And that's why no one does usability testing. And it's why testing seems to be very code focused and not really worrying enough about, hang on, is this product actually going to make people happy? Is it going to help them achieve what they were trying to achieve? On the flip side, production monitoring is great at that. It has full view of user behavior, business outcomes, all wonderful. Problem is things don't tend to come back into the product, the big frustration of everyone working post-release. And it's post-release, so that anything that does go wrong is immediately impacting your customers, and that's bad, right? So what we're doing here, by linking the two together, is we build that model of the relationship between the product, the users, and the business outcomes, and we build that in production. And we've got this common factor between monitoring and testing, which is the product, and then we can use that to bring that model back into testing. So we can bring back the understanding of how product drives user behavior and business outcomes back into testing so that you're really optimizing your product. And that's what we call customer experience optimization. It's making sure that the whole development process is focused on not, is this code correct? Is my string class concatenating strings correctly? It's looking at, is this change I'm about to make, is this product going to delight users and drive the business outcome? And that's it. So I hope that was interesting. If you want to learn more, please just come to our website. Please get in touch. We'd love to talk about this stuff and love to hear your story and see how we can use digital performance management and customer experience optimization to make your business more successful, to make our products better. We do have a couple of minutes for questions, so I will now hand over to James, who's going to be master of questions.
Great. Well done, Anthony. Great presentation as well, Alex. That was really good, really interesting. Loved every minute of it. We're right to the wire here, so I'm going to try and fit in probably a couple of questions. I'll start with, which one shall I start with? Okay, I already know improving performance will make my website better. Can't you just tell me what I need to do to optimize? Okay, so good question. Yes, we can actually help you understand what you need to do to optimize, but to be fair, that may not end up being your biggest challenge. Your biggest challenge will probably end up being how you can then, once you've got those optimizations ready to go, how you can justify the work to do them. And we have a whole bunch of customers that come to us and ask for help. We've provided them with help either with the products that we have or with some additional advisory services. And sometimes they will not get around to making those changes, those optimizations. They won't actually get to see how they improve. So the biggest question you've got to ask, is not always just should I care about performance, it's how much should I care. It's quantifying that challenge that sits in front of you, understanding how much 1 second is costing you right now as a business, or how much more money you could make, or how much more conversions you could make from an additional second improvement in performance. And that's what our customers use to justify change. Whether they're ready to go with that or not, whether they've worked it out themselves or not, whether they've come to us and we provided them with that information, that's what ultimately they need to do. So that's why I'd recommend where everyone starts. And really, again, ultimately that means starting with Real User Monitoring with RUM, because that's the products, that's the opportunity you've got to quantify the impact of a change in speed and performance. How are we doing for time, folks? I'll try and squeeze in one more question.
Sure, yeah, that's not a problem.
Okay, cool. So what else have we got? We've got I'm a developer and I understand the need to spend time optimizing code. The challenge is I can't get my company to prioritize this type of work. Have you got any tips to help me? Okay, so a very similar kind of question in a way. Yes, we can help you. We love making people heroes in their organizations, and we've done it with many of our customers, to be fair. We've created many advocates and evangelists that have gone on to do wonderful things, not only for their organizations, but actually ultimately for their own careers, to be fair. So in terms of engaging with us, there are a number of ways to do it. Clearly getting us on site and talking to people is probably the best start. That said, if you're the sort of person that wants to engage at arm's length, then yes, you can take a trial of Real User Monitoring if you so wish, and that gives you the opportunity to see your own data and start thinking about that quantification, ultimately for free. We don't give you long, we give you just 3 weeks to do that, but it does give you an opportunity to start looking at that information and sharing it in your business. Of course, we'd like to support you doing that. We'd like to help make you a hero, but yes, we can help you get there, help your organization pay attention, if you like, if that's ultimately the question that we're looking at here. I have got one more question that's probably worth answering if I've got the time. I shall go back to my MC and just double check that's fine.
Yep, that's fine.
Good. All right. The last question here is, how does performance impact prediction work? And giving myself this question to finish on is probably the toughest question to answer, to be fair, especially as I don't have our team of data scientists in the room. So the first thing to reinforce, of course, is that we do have a team of data scientists, and they're there to do all the heavy lifting with algorithms and machine learning and AI and all that good stuff for our customers, so they don't have to dive around the data, and our products can then deliver insights at the highest level, so people can use that to get on with their work. So that's fantastic. In terms of the detail about how it works, I think probably the most important thing to start with is the fact that the data we use to drive this product, Real User Monitoring, is not sampled. We're able to capture the speed experience on every page a visitor hits during their journey to a website. And having this performance of individual pages in a session tied together with their behavior is vital to powering our predictive model. This isn't possible with traditional analytics packages, it has to be said. This is only something you can get from Eggplant and RUM. It allows us to accurately understand the experience of users that convert, and I guess more importantly for some of our customers, those that don't convert at the end of the day. You've seen it today. Alex has shown it to you. He showed you what would happen if he improved the speed of one of our showcase customers. And also what it does is, once you understand what speed your visitors are currently experiencing, you can also understand where the most conversions are occurring based on the page load times users experience throughout their visit. So with that data, you're able to target speed and model what the shift in performance would look like in a distribution, which is partly what Alex was getting to in his demonstration. In very simple terms, what it does, it models how many of the slower users that sped up would move into a higher or lower converting buckets of time. So as you shift those distributions left or right, you get different numbers of people that convert, ultimately different profiles to them. There is more explanation I can give anyone that's interested on this. What I would suggest to get in touch, and we can show you some more illustrations or get you in the product, and even if you want, get you in touch with our own data scientists. I don't think that'd be a problem at all, to be fair. So yeah, get in touch and we'll be able to help further if required. I think I'm going to stop there. Hopefully we've kept enough and kept enough people interested, which is good. They were good questions. So back to our MC.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Anthony, Alex, and James, for a wonderful presentation today. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We hope you learned something new. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.